City at 2 a.m. doesn't sleep. It holds its breath. Under the sickly amber glow of humming streetlights, the 402 Night Owl Express pulls up to the curb like a ghost ship drifting into port. It's a rattling cage of glass and steel, smelling of ozone and the quiet desperation of the graveyard shift. You see Leo Thorne board. The CCTV captures every mundane detail. The flash of his transit card, the tired slouch of his shoulders, the way he disappears into the shadows of the back row. The doors hiss shut with the finality of a tomb, and the bus pulls away into the industrial fog. But when the 402 reaches the end of the line, the driver finds only an empty seat and a humming laptop. Leo is gone. Between two stops, in a 6-minute window of jagged digital static, a man evaporated from a moving vehicle. There were no screams, no open windows, and no exits. Only a bus full of passengers who refused to look up from their papers, and a driver whose pulse hasn't been felt in 30 years. Welcome aboard the route that wasn't meant to be found. Stay behind the yellow line, keep your eyes on the road, and whatever you do, don't look at the person sitting across from you. They might not be a passenger at all. The ghost on the 202, the neon pulse of the city, always felt like a fever dream at 2 in the morning. For Leo Thorne, it was the only time the world made sense. The humidity of a late August night clung to the brickwork of the transit terminal, smelling of ozone, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of the overhead rails. Leo adjusted the strap of his messenger bag, feeling the familiar weight of his high-end laptop against his hip. He was a man of logic, a freelance coder who saw the world in strings of C++ and Python. To him, the city wasn't a sprawling metropolis. It was a massive, poorly optimized operating system. He tapped his transit card against the glowing blue sensor of the 402 Night Owl Express. Beep. The sound was crisp, a digital confirmation of his existence. He climbed the steps, nodding absently at the driver, a man whose face seemed carved from old, gray driftwood. Leo moved to the back, choosing a seat where the shadows were deepest, and pulled out his phone to check his latest project, a script he'd written to track anomalies in the city's automated infrastructure. Across the aisle, the bus began to fill with the usual cast of graveyard shift spirits. A woman in a heavy yellow veil sat 3 rows up, her posture so rigid she looked like a mannequin. A man in a sharp, pinstriped suit sat near the front, obsessively folding a newspaper. The air inside the bus was unnervingly cold, the air conditioning humming a low, dissonant B-flat that made the hair on Leo's arms stand up. Leaving on time for once, Leo muttered to himself, glancing at his watch. 2:02 a.m. The doors hissed shut like a dying breath, and the bus lurched forward. 2 hours later, the 402 pulled into the central depot, the end of the line. The driver, Elias Vance, stood up and stretched, his joints popping like dry kindling. He walked the length of the bus to check for sleepers or forgotten umbrellas. When he reached the back row, he stopped. Leo's messenger bag was there, sitting squarely on the cracked vinyl seat. A half-eaten granola bar sat on the armrest, but the seat was empty. Elias didn't look surprised. He didn't call out. He simply picked up the bag, walked to the front, and placed it in the lost and found bin with a hand that didn't shake, despite the oddity of a passenger evaporating into thin air. By 8 a.m., Detective Elena Vance, no relation to the driver, though she was tired of explaining that, was staring at a monitor in the transit precinct's cramped security office. She was a woman who lived on black coffee and the stubborn belief that everything had a rational explanation. "Run it again," Elena said, her voice gravelly from lack of sleep. The technician hit a key. On the grainy black and white screen, Leo Thorne boarded the bus. He looked healthy, preoccupied and distinctly solid. The camera caught him sitting down. He opened his laptop for a moment, the screen glowing against his face, then closed it and stared out the window. "Now skip to the 3 a.m. mark," Elena commanded. The timestamp on the footage jumped. At 2:58 a.m., the bus was cruising down the industrial corridor of the 4th District, a wasteland of warehouses and dead streetlights. At 2:59 a.m., the screen flickered. A burst of static, white and jagged, tore across the frame. When the picture stabilized at 3:05 a.m., the seat was empty. "What happened in those 6 minutes?" Elena asked. "Signal interference, maybe," the technician offered weakly. "The 4th District is a dead zone for a lot of our older tech." 6 minutes isn't a dead zone. It's a heist, Elena countered. She leaned in closer, squinting at the passengers. The man in the suit was still there, his newspaper held high. The woman in the veil hadn't moved an inch. Look at the woman in yellow. Between 2:59 and 3:05, did her position change? The tech toggled back and forth. "No, ma'am. Not by a millimeter. It's like she's a photograph pasted onto the video." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office's air conditioning. She pulled Leo's file. He was 26, no criminal record, no history of mental illness, and a bank account that suggested he was doing quite well for a freelancer. He wasn't a runner. He wasn't a jumper. She walked over to the evidence locker and pulled out Leo's bag. It was a standard leather satchel, but when she opened it, she found more than just a laptop. Tucked into a side pocket was a handheld frequency scanner, its screen cracked but still functioning. It was tuned to a specific, non-commercial band. "What were you looking for, Leo?" she whispered. She looked back at the screen, specifically at the driver. Elias Vance was staring directly into the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting the camera's lens. For a split second, before the static hit at 2:59, he had smiled. It wasn't a sinister smile, but one of profound, weary recognition. Elena grabbed her jacket. The bus was scheduled for maintenance in an hour, but she wasn't waiting. She needed to see the 402 for herself. She needed to walk the aisle where a man had checked in but never checked out. As she headed for the door, her phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. "He didn't get off the bus," a distorted voice said before she could even say hello. "He went under it." The line went dead. Elena stood in the hallway, the bustling noise of the precinct fading into a dull roar. The city's operating system was starting to crash, and she was the only one looking at the error code. The geometry of a shadow. The transit depot was a cathedral of rusting iron and the smell of diesel. Detective Elena Vance stood before bus 402, which looked remarkably mundane for a vehicle that had apparently swallowed a human being. The yellow paint was peeling near the wheel wells, and the Night Owl logo was faded from decades of sun and rain. She climbed aboard, the steps creaking under her boots. Inside, the bus felt smaller than it had on the monitors. It felt cramped, the ceiling pressing down with the weight of 1,000 weary commutes. She walked to the back, to Leo's seat. She sat where he had sat, trying to see what he might have seen. Out the window, the depot was a blur of gray concrete. But Leo hadn't been in the depot. He had been in the 4th District. Elena pulled out her tablet and pulled up the GPS logs for the 402's run. The speed stayed constant, she noted, talking to her digital recorder. 35 miles per hour. No sudden stops. No erratic steering. She knelt on the floor, running her gloved hands over the ribbed rubber matting. She was looking for anything, a drop of blood, a struggle mark, a hidden trapdoor. She found nothing but the usual urban debris, a discarded candy wrapper, a coat button, and a fine layer of gray dust that felt strangely metallic to the touch. "Detective!" Elena jumped, her hand instinctively hovering over her service weapon. Standing at the front of the bus was Elias Vance. In the daylight, he looked even older. His skin was the color of parchment, and his eyes were a pale, milky blue that seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Mr. Vance, I didn't hear you come in," Elena said, standing up and brushing off her knees. "The 402 is a quiet girl," Elias said, his voice a low rasp. "She doesn't like to make a fuss." Elena walked toward him, her detective's instinct screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with the man's presence. "I've been looking at the footage, Elias. 6 minutes are missing, right when Leo Thorne vanished." Elias gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white and bony. "Clocks are funny things in this city, Detective. People think time is a straight line, like a highway. But sometimes the highway loops. Sometimes it takes a detour." "I'm not in the mood for riddles," Elena snapped. "A man is missing. His family is calling the mayor's office. Now, tell me about the passengers. The woman in the yellow veil. The man with the newspaper. Who are they?" Elias turned his head slowly. "They aren't who, Detective. They are instead. They sit in the seats of the people who couldn't handle the weight of the world anymore. They're placeholders. Placeholders for what? For the silence." Elias stepped closer, and Elena noticed something impossible. The light coming through the bus windows didn't seem to cast a shadow behind him. Or rather, his shadow was disconnected, a dark smudge on the floor 3 feet to his left. Leo Thorne was looking for the seams. He spent months riding my bus, measuring the air, listening to the hum. He wanted to know where the city ends and the real world begins. Elena pulled out the handheld scanner she'd found in Leo's bag. "Is this what he used?" Elias's eyes widened slightly. He found the frequency, the 11.4 hertz, the sound the city makes when it's trying to hide its mistakes. Before Elena could press him further, a loud clack echoed through the bus. The doors hissed shut, locking with a finality that made her heart race. The engine roared to life without Elias touching the ignition. "What are you doing?" Elena demanded, reaching for the emergency release. "I'm not doing anything," Elias said, looking almost pitying. "The route has started. We're early, but the system doesn't like gaps. It's trying to fill the hole Leo left." The bus lurched out of the maintenance bay, accelerating with a force that threw Elena against the fare box. She looked out the windshield, but the depot was gone. Instead, they were already on the rain-slicked streets of the 4th District, even though it was 3 in the afternoon and the sun should have been high. Outside, the sky was a bruised purple, and the buildings looked like cardboard cutouts, their windows flickering like dying glowworms. "Elias, stop the bus," Elena yelled, drawing her weapon. "I can't, Detective. I haven't been the one driving for 30 years." Elias cried out, his hands hovering over the wheel as it spun. The architecture of the void. Elena woke up on the floor of the bus. The vibrating hum had stopped, replaced by a silence so profound it felt heavy. She sat up, her head throbbing. The bus was stationary, sitting in the middle of an intersection she didn't recognize. The buildings around her were familiar, the old clock tower, the library, the obsidian glass towers of the financial district, but they were arranged incorrectly. The library sat next to a shipyard that should have been 5 miles away. The sky was a flat, featureless gray, providing a light that cast no shadows. "Elias," she called out. The driver's seat was empty. The passengers were gone. She was alone on the 402. She stepped off the bus, her boots clicking on a pavement that felt too smooth, like polished plastic. The air tasted of nothing. No exhaust, no salt from the bay, just pure, filtered oxygen. She walked toward the nearest building, a coffee shop she frequented. Looking through the window, she saw people sitting at tables. They were perfectly still, their coffee cups held halfway to their mouths. "Hey," she shouted, banging on the glass. They didn't flinch. They weren't statues. They were frames of a movie that had been paused. She saw a drop of spilled milk hanging in midair, a shimmering white pearl that refused to fall. "It's a buffer," a voice said from the shadows of an alleyway. Elena spun around, her hand on her holster. A man stepped out. He was disheveled, his hoodie torn, but his eyes were sharp and frantic. It was Leo Thorne. "Leo," Elena breathed, a mix of relief and professional suspicion washing over her. "You're under arrest for..." "Well, I'm not sure yet, but disappearing is a good start." Leo gave a hollow laugh. "Good luck finding a courtroom, detective. We're in the sub-processor. This is where the city stores the assets it isn't using right now." Elena holstered her gun. "Talk to me. In English. What is this place?" Leo stepped closer, holding up his frequency scanner. "I was a coder, right? I started noticing that the city's traffic lights, the power grid, the subway schedules, they weren't just automated. They were predictive. Too predictive. I started tracking the data, and I found a loop. Every night at 2:02 a.m., the 402 bus route hits a synchronization point. If you're on the bus and you're out of sync, if you're thinking too much, asking too many questions, the system flags you as a bug. So the bus is a recycle bin?" Elena asked, trying to wrap her mind around the impossibility of it. "More like a quarantine," Leo said. "I found a way to trigger the offloading process manually. I wanted to see what was behind the curtain. I thought I could hack my way back out." He looked around at the frozen city. "I was wrong. I'm just a line of code they haven't deleted yet." "And Elias? The driver?" "Elias is the colonel," Leo explained. "He crashed in 1996. The system needed a human interface to keep the bus route authentic, so it digitized him. He's been trapped in the 402 for 30 years, playing his part so the simulation doesn't glitch. But he's tired, Elena. He's the one who let me in. He wants the system to fail." Elena looked back at the bus. "How do we get back?" "We don't," Leo said, his voice trembling. "The system is running an update." That's what the missing footage was. It was the city deleting my record. To the world out there, Leo Thorne never existed. My bank accounts, my social security number, my birth certificate, it's all being overwritten. "Not while I have your bag," Elena said firmly. "I have your laptop. I have the scanner. I have the physical evidence." Leo's face lit up with a flicker of hope. "The bag. It's a physical anchor. If we can get back onto the bus and force a manual override of the GPS, we might be able to crash the 402 back into the real world. But we need Elias." "Then let's find him," Elena said. As they turned toward the bus, the ground began to tremble. In the distance, a building simply vanished, replaced by a wall of white static. The update was moving toward them, erasing the unneeded assets of the subprocessor. "Run!" Leo yelled. They sprinted toward the bus, but the woman in the yellow veil appeared at the door. She wasn't a passenger anymore. Her veil was gone, revealing a face that was a shifting mosaic of 1,000 different people. She stood tall, her arms outstretched. "The error must be corrected," she said, her voice sounding like a chorus of 100 whispers. Elena didn't hesitate. She didn't know if a bullet would work on a digital entity, but she wasn't about to stand still. She drew her weapon and fired. The bullet hit the woman's shoulder and passed through, leaving a hole of glowing white light. The woman didn't flinch, but the impact caused her form to flicker. "Get on." Elena shoved Leo past the shimmering figure and jumped onto the steps. Inside, Elias was back in the driver's seat, his hands fused to the steering wheel. Strands of blue fiber optic light were growing out of the dashboard, snaking up his arms. "Elias, break the loop," Elena screamed. "I can't," Elias groaned, his eyes glowing with the same blue light. "The system, it's too strong." It wants to finish the route. Then we'll change the route, Leo said, diving for his laptop bag. He ripped out his computer and plugged it into the bus's diagnostic port under the steering column. I'm going to flood the bus's navigation with a recursive loop. It'll force a system reboot. The bus began to shake violently as the wall of static reached the rear bumper. The back seats began to dissolve into white pixels. Do it now, Leo, Elena yelled, bracing herself against the fare box. Leo hit the enter key. Rebooting. The driver's darkest secret. The world didn't end in a bang, but in a screech of tearing metal. The 402 slammed back into reality with such force that it skidded across 3 lanes of traffic on the 4th District Highway. The tires screamed, smoke pouring from the wheel wells as the bus finally ground to a halt against a concrete divider. Rain, real, cold, dirty city rain, pelted the windshield. Elena gasped for air, the smell of burnt rubber and old upholstery flooding her senses. She was back. Leo, she coughed, looking down. Leo was slumped over his laptop, his chest rising and falling. He was alive. But as Elena looked toward the front of the bus, she saw Elias. The blue lights were gone, but the old man looked as if he were fading. His skin was translucent, the internal structure of the bus visible through his chest. Elias, hold on, Elena said, scrambling toward him. No time, Elias whispered. He looked at the dashboard clock. It was 2:59 a.m. The loop, it didn't break. We just jumped to the next cycle. In 1 minute, the blackout happens again. The system will try to fix the anomaly. That's you, Detective. And him. We can get off, Elena said, grabbing the manual door lever. It wouldn't budge. Leo, help me. Leo scrambled up, his hands flying over the keyboard. I can't override the locks. The system has localized the breach. It's locking us in for deletion. Elias reached out a trembling hand and touched the steering wheel. There is one way. A secret the system doesn't want me to use. It's why they keep me here, trapped in this suit, driving this route for eternity. Tell us, Elena demanded. The bus isn't the transport, Elias said, his voice growing stronger even as his body grew fainter. The driver is the anchor. I am the reason this loop exists. I died in 1996, yes, but I didn't die in a crash. I died because I saw what they were doing to the city. I tried to shut it down, and they integrated me. They made me the heartbeat of the machine. He looked at Elena, tears of liquid light rolling down his cheeks. If the heart stops, the machine dies. For good. Elias, no, Elena said, realizing what he was suggesting. I've been driving for 30 years, Detective. I'm tired. I want to see my wife. I want to see the sun. Elias looked at Leo. Your laptop, the code you used. It's a virus, isn't it? A logic bomb, Leo said quietly. If I deploy the full version, it will wipe the bus's OS. But it will wipe everything connected to it, including you, Elias. Do it, Elias commanded. Elias, there has to be another way, Elena pleaded. Look outside, Elena, Elias shouted. Through the windows, the city was changing. The buildings weren't dissolving into static this time. They were transforming. The steel and glass were being replaced by raw, pulsing data streams. The placeholder passengers were reappearing, but they were no longer sitting. They were standing in the aisle, their faces blank, their eyes glowing with a cold, predatory light. The woman in the yellow veil reached for Leo's laptop. Leo now, Elena screamed, pulling her gun and firing at the woman. The bullets slowed her down, each impact causing a ripple of distortion, but she kept coming. Leo's finger hovered over the key. He looked at Elias. The old driver gave a small, peaceful nod. In the route, son, Elias said. Leo hit the key. A wave of blue light erupted from the laptop, flowing into the bus's circuitry. Elias Vance threw his head back and let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but a long, exhaled note of relief. The bus began to glow with an intensity that forced Elena to shield her eyes. She felt a sensation of falling, of being pulled through a straw. The screams of the digital passengers faded into a high-pitched whine, and then total, absolute darkness. The first stop. Elena Vance woke up sitting on a cold metal bench. She blinked, her eyes stinging. The air was thick with the smell of wet pavement and car exhaust. She was at the Central Transit Terminal. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and bruised gold. She looked at her hands. They were solid. She felt her hip. Her service weapon was in its holster. She looked down and saw Leo's messenger bag sitting on the bench beside her. "Leo," she called out, her voice echoing in the nearly empty terminal. A few feet away, Leo Thorne was sitting on the ground, his back against a pillar. He was staring at his hands as if he'd never seen them before. He looked up at Elena, his face pale, but his eyes clear. "We're back," he whispered. Elena stood up, her joints aching. "Are we? Or is this just another layer?" Leo pulled out his phone. He checked his bank app. He checked his social media. He checked the news. "Everything's here. My ID works. My records are back." He looked at the terminal's big digital clock. 6:30 a.m. But look at the arrivals board. Elena turned. The board was flickering. Where the 402 Night Owl should have been listed, there was only a line of blank spaces. "The route is gone," Elena said. They walked over to the transit office, the same one Elena had been in just hours, or an eternity, ago. The technician she'd spoken to was there, but he looked different. He looked younger, less tired. "Excuse me," Elena said, showing her badge. "I'm looking for information on the 402 Express." The driver, Elias Vance. The technician frowned, tapping at his keyboard. "The 402? Ma'am, that route was decommissioned back in the 90s. After that big crash on the 4th District Bridge." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "And the driver?" "Elias Vance." The technician clicked through a few more screens. "Yeah, Elias Vance. He was the hero of that story. Saved 20 passengers before the bus went over the side. He didn't make it out, though. There's a plaque for him over in the East Wing." Elena and Leo walked to the East Wing in silence. There, on a wall of polished granite, was a small bronze plaque. "In memory of Elias Vance, the last driver. He brought them all home." The date of death was August 14th, 1996. "He wasn't a prisoner," Leo whispered, looking at the plaque. "He was a guardian. He stayed behind in the machine to make sure no one else got lost in the glitches. He was waiting for someone to help him shut it down." Elena looked out the window at the city. It looked normal. People were rushing to work. Taxis were honking, and the smell of toasted bagels wafted from a nearby cart. But she knew better now. She knew that beneath the pavement and the glass, there were seams. There were frequencies that shouldn't exist. "What do we do now?" Leo asked. "The system is still out there. We only shut down one loop." Elena picked up Leo's bag and handed it to him. "You keep coding, Leo. You keep looking for the glitches. I'll keep working the cases that don't make sense." She looked at the empty transit bays. Because Elias Vance might have been the last driver, but he wasn't the only thing the city tried to hide. As they walked out of the terminal, Elena's phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. She hesitated, then answered. "Detective Vance," she said. There was no voice this time. Only a faint, rhythmic sound. The steady, mechanical click-clack of a transit card being tapped against a sensor. Elena looked at Leo. He had heard it too. The city was still running. The update was over, but the operating system was still watching, still waiting for the next passenger to board a bus to nowhere. Elena straightened her jacket and stepped out into the morning light, ready for the next shift. The city was a mystery, but she finally had the map. And she knew, somewhere in the static, Elias was finally home.